But what does, listen to this, folks. This is amazing. The divine response. What is that? When you go look this up, it simply means the same thing we read over in the book of Acts. The determined purpose. That's the divine response. The determined purpose and foreknowledge of God. Say to him, listen to God. What did God do? God said, I reserve something. Did the people who God reserve themselves? No, that's not what the book says. The book says that God did it. I reserve for myself what? 7,000 men. Man, most people would read that and go, woo, 7,000. God, wow, you saved a lot of people. Folks, we ought to be crying at that number. Why? Because there were millions of men. And you mean to tell me only 7,000 out of the millions were saved? Yes. Yes. Only 7,000 out of approximately 9 to 10 million people. Who have not bowed the knee to Baal. Even so then, listen to God, at this present time, there is a what? A remnant. How do we get this remnant of Israel? It's according to God's election of grace. Do you see that? Who said that? Kevin? No, man, I ain't say that. God says he's going around today electing certain Jews to go to heaven. I can't believe that. Why not? He did it in the Old Testament. He reserved 7,000 out of millions. Now you're going to complain that he says, I got a remnant based on election? What do you want? That's what he said. And if by grace, and this is really what I want to show you, if by grace, here's the blasphemy that they were committing. It's by grace. God simply reserved, and then God turned around and elected. If it's by grace, then it is no longer of works. You cannot have both. You cannot say, I'm saved by grace, then I must go to church. I must read the Bible. I must do this. I must do that. No, friend, that's grace and works. You see? So, when you hear me say the evidence of salvation, what is that? That's the outward evidence of salvation. It's not for God. The outward evidence of salvation is for you and for me. How do I know that somebody is a believer? Is that they're obeying what they see, what the word says. That's the only way I would know. You see, there's a lot of people out there that say that they are Christians and that they're saved, but outwardly you can't tell them any different than the world. Does that mean that they're not saved? No, of course not. But the only way I can tell is from an outward appearance. That's why God says, Kevin, you don't go around saying that person is saved and that person is not saved. You have no clue. Why? Because salvation, as we've seen in Romans 2, is an inward transformation. circumcision of the heart. Can you look inside the body of somebody to see if their heart was circumcised? To see if the Holy Spirit is residing in them? How does God know a believer? Because he himself, his spirit, is living on the inside of that body with the believer. That's how God knows. Does he look at the behavior? No, he judges the behavior. The behavior is going to be judged based on the intent of the behavior, not the actual act. The actual act, friend, it's nothing. It's the intent behind it that God judges. All right, so what am I saying? Will a true born-again believer show outwardly that they are? Of course, just like a murderer shows outwardly that they're a murderer. But is that salvation? Of course not. Salvation don't come that way. So if you start adding anything, then you know you're not talking salvation. Salvation is simply grace. God gives it away. How does he do that? We just told you up here how you do it. I reserve and I elect. That's how he does it, friends. He goes around reserving. He goes around electing. I will have mercy upon whom I will have mercy. I will have compassion upon whom I will have compassion. It doesn't matter if you have a problem with that, folks. That's what the book says. If it's by grace, then it's no longer works. Otherwise, grace is no longer grace. But if it's of works, it is no longer grace. Otherwise, work is no longer work. What then? What then? If that's true, what then? Israel, the nation, has not obtained something. Something that it actually seeks. How does it seek it? It seeks it in a different way than God told them they can have it. God says you can have it through the sacrifice. They said, forget that stupid sacrifice, God. I don't want that. What I want to do is be obedient to the law. God says, no, you can't be obedient to the law. He says, I don't care what you say, God. That's what I'm going to do, and you have no choice but to accept that. God said, okay, if that's what you want, you can have it. But you're not going to come to me. But the elect, who got it? Obtained it. So there were a certain group of people in Israel. They were Jews. They said, no, I'm going to come to you, God, the way I want to. God says, no. My elect are the only ones that are going to obtain it. Now, what happened? When God does that, what happens to people? Folks, this is extremely difficult. And I know I'm going to get comments on what I'm about to say. That doesn't matter to me because it's written in the book. The rest, the non-elect. What happened to those people? God blinded them. So, whoa, time out, Kevin. Wait a minute, man. You mean to tell me that God, the one that so loved the world and loved everybody and said Israel is my people, you mean to tell me he's going around blinding people? No, I didn't tell you that. I simply read to you what it said. God said that. God said, none of Israel obtained what it sought. How many of them? 0. None of them. However, I did go around and I went and I elected certain people out of Israel. They got it. And that's the only ones that's going to ever get it. What happened to the rest of them, God? I blinded them. Calm down. Listen, folks. Salvation is of the Lord. It's his to give away. Let me ask you a question.